Okay, this is an introduction to using numeric variables, just basically what they are, how they do, uh, what we could do with them, how to get in from strings. So far, we've actually come across string variables, things like name, surname, home. And from the input tasks we did last time, we find that every time you run input, the thing it gets in is going to be a string. So we're going to ask for an age and a height for a couple of our hobbits. That means that we need to convert them into numbers. There are two basic types of number that are used in Python. One is an int, which is the sort of thing you'd like if you were counting something, particularly counting things like we're going to count the number of birthdays as the age, so that's an integer. We don't have fractions of a year. And there are heights where there could be fractions of an amount. Now, the way to convert strings or any other variables to attempt to convert into an integer or to turn into a float, which is the decimal type. So we're using floats as decimal types. It's not quite decimal. They're actually standard form numbers, floats, if you know about standard form. So we're going to convert our two strings into ages, into the right types. So we're going to get age and turn it into a number, an integer. I'm going to take the height and convert that into a value. Now, having two variable names or a variable name and redefining it is generally poor practice in a piece of code. You might do it across functions, but in a program, you should not be changing the use of a variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to create two new variables, age as input, height as input, and convert those. Okay, I've had to change my editor because whilst working at home, I found it really awkward to try and get Python to work properly. And I'll just restart this. Python on the internet, over the internet, I've got a slow internet, so I'm actually using a proper Python development environment, and this one's actually called PyCharm. Don't ask you to download it, it can be difficult to use. But this is our basic program as it stands at the moment, and if I run it, we get asked, what's your forename? Frodo. What's your surname? Baggins. And where do you live? The Shire. And what I can do now is I can actually see what's going on with our types. So F name, print it out. I see it's Frodo. A command you might not be aware of is the type. If I type in type and give it a variable, it will tell me about the variable, not what's in it. So this turns around and tells me that Frodo is a string. So we're going to use that for our two new variable types. Our two new variables, as we saw in the notes, are going to be age input and height input. So age input, not input, not input. So just to put this code in quickly with the video paused. We've got two input variables, age and height. Notice the type prompt says how old are you in just years and how old are you in meters. And when I run it, you'd be expected to type the right thing in. Now, the age, we know we want to turn into an integer, so we can say age equals int, and then the age input variable. And I want to do the height equals float. Float is our decimal type. So we've got two variables there which define them, and let's just print out some quick information. Saying registered as, and then give the list of variables that we've got. So we've got surname, forename, the Shire or the address, the age input, age, and the height. Notice I'm using the height as a value, not as typed in. Okay, So we'll see something strange happen when I type in a height, which is going to be a whole number. So save it and run it. Full name, Frodo. Surname is Baggins. Where do you live? The Shire. How old are you in years? 75. And how tall are you in meters? And I'm going to say he's only 1 meter tall. And if we look at the output, it says registered as Baggins Frodo. That's our 2 strings. The address is the Shire. And then we got the number 75 with no decimal point. That's our integer. And then 1 with a decimal point shows me that I've got a value. I just want to check what types these last 2 are. I can do print type and age. So I'm just checking what does it, as it stored age as. It says an int. And what does the height come out as? That's a float. So we've got 2 value types. There are other ways of setting variables, so I could set up the counter, or sorry, group size. At the moment, I could say group size is just 5. That's not bad. I can actually, it is perfectly valid integer type. But when you come to read your code, it may not be as clear. So if you're setting definite values, be as clear as you can what they are. So make it a group size is an integer. The reason being, if I say the current value of gold, and I say that it is 10, the value of my gold is at the moment an integer. But that may not be true. It might actually be a decimal number. So to be clear, if I always say when I'm setting a value to being a float, and I make sure it is a float, it will be fairly clear all the time. Okay, so that's setting up our first variables and printing them out as integers.